Welcome to Bible Study 2.0. Today we're going to be studying the book of Ruth, Chapter 1. Last time you said Ruth is a story of a redemption by the kinsman redeemer. You also spoke of the Garden of Eden and the part he played in getting them kicked out of the garden as punishment for disobeying God, but also because they chose the ways of the serpent over the ways of God. You also spoke of the book of Ruth as the seed plot for the entire Bible. Today we're going to show Ruth as a foreshadowing of Jesus redeeming us in the end times.
Thank you for that introduction of today's topic, Diane. We will be studying Ruth as a foreshadowing. But before we get into kinsmen, redeemers, blood avengers, cities of refuge, and goels, we need to actually go through the verses and study Ruth. A little patience and we'll get to all those terms soon enough. The book of Ruth, Chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of the wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephraites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. The Bible speaks in parables, analogies, and similitudes. We're going to look at the book of Ruth as a similitude. This certain man was from Bethlehem. This is where we get the location of the house of David, which is fundamental in understanding the prophecy of the Messiah being born in Bethlehem. Also of note, the verse says, Elimelech was from Bethlehem, Judah. That means he was from Bethlehem of the tribe of Judah. 1 Samuel 17:15, but David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. We can also guess the fields where the shepherds that came to worship the newborn Christ are in the very fields cultivated in the story of Ruth by Boaz. To ensure we understand they came from Bethlehem, we see it mentioned again. Moab was the place just south of Israel, founded by the son who was the result of an incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughters. Well, one daughter. While Moab pretended to be friends with Israel, they stabbed them in the back every chance they got. They would make mutual defense policies and renege on them at the crucial moments. Now, it was illegal for a Jew to marry a Moabitess under Jewish law. So Ruth 1:3, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. Obviously, we don't need to remember much about Elimelech, and consequently their 2 sons. But Naomi is a central figure we need to pay close attention to, because we will place her figuratively as Israel, while Ruth will be the Gentile bride of Jesus, and Boaz will be put into the role of Jesus. This replacing of the characters in the story will make sense as a foreshadowing of what will take place and lead us to understand why Jesus is crucified. We have to realize the crucifixion was an accomplishment, as Paul tells us in Romans 5:18-21. Therefore, as by the offense of one judgment came upon all men to condemnation, even so by the righteousness of one, the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. Romans 5:19 then, for as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. Moreover, the law entered, that the offense might abound. But where sin abounded, grace did much more abound. That as sin hath reigned unto death, even so might grace reign through righteousness unto eternal life by Jesus Christ our Lord. Returning to verse 1 and replacing Naomi as Israel, we need to remember Jesus foretold the fall of Jerusalem in Matthew 24:2. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. In 70 A.D., Titus surrounded Jerusalem and leveled the entire city. Afterward, the city was brought even to the ground, as the verse said. The Jews were deported to various parts of the world on pain of death if they returned. This fulfilled the prophecy in Isaiah that says the Jews will be again regathered after the great diaspora. Jeremiah 35:7. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. Ezekiel speaks 2:18 to verse 32 of the way Jerusalem will fall. I'm going to keep this jaunt into a rabbit hole very short. While quite interesting, the prophecy in Ezekiel 21 is tangential to what we are here for, so we won't read the verses there. Instead, we'll just give a short form of what actually happened for you to compare to what Ezekiel said would happen in a time yet far future to him. There are two generals sent by Rome to defeat Israel, Vespasian and Titus. Verse 19:2 ways the sword may come, stop at the head of the city, as told in Tacitus, the Roman historian, where divination took place, as in verse 2. The walls around Jerusalem were about the height of a 10-story building. Verse 22 describes exactly what Titus would do centuries beforehand to bring about the defeat of Jerusalem. Verse 23 explains the Jews believed incorrectly help would come from the east, not understanding the prophecy spoke of Jesus, not an imagined army. Verse 24 explains the fate of the Jews, that they will be taken with the hand. 26 removes the crown, or at least temporarily the favored status of the Jews, until we see in verse 27 Israel will be overturned until God gives it to him whose right it is. Israel has been vacant of Jews in the eyes of the world for almost 2,000 years, until Ben-Gurion announced to the world in 1948 the Jews would once again inhabit Israel. That word, until, is just about the only thing standing between the prophecy of Jesus returning and the actual event. I'm sorry, but the pull to go down these rabbit holes is almost unbearable, so let's get back to Ruth. Ruth 1:5, and Mahalan and Chilion died, also both of them, and the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. Under the law, women were not allowed to own land without a husband or son. When both Naomi's sons perished, she became a beggar. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead, and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. While Naomi was yet in Moab, she had heard the famine was over in Israel. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters, why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons. Would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back upon her people, and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. This law of women not owning property without a man becomes more apparent even to us without a Jewish background. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my God, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. Ruth 1:18, when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them, and they said, Is this Naomi? We really don't know the character of Naomi, but we can surmise she was a good woman, because she certainly impressed Ruth. Ruth could have gone back to her family, where she would surely find safety and presumably a husband rather quickly, because, as we will find out later on, she is strikingly beautiful. In these next few verses, we see a deep and abiding love for both Naomi and her religion. In staying with Naomi, Ruth is risking a life possibly very short due to starvation, as well as giving up the certainty of safety her own family would have given her. And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. Mara means changed beyond recognition. She creates astonishment among her former acquaintances, who ask, Is this Naomi? She replies, Call me not Naomi, example, pleasant or sweet, but call me Mara, which is bitter. In the light of her bitter experience and her present pitiable plight, the old name was become peculiarly inappropriate. Remembering we are going to cast Naomi as the land, creation, we begin to see a parallel of what happens to creation after the fall of man. Life used to be pleasant or sweet, but now we have pain, death, sorrow. In Ruth 1:21, I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me? and the Almighty hath afflicted me. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. We could look at Jerusalem prideful before the siege, with its walls newly raised to the height of a 10-story building, as being full. Presumably, Naomi and her husband had sold property in Bethlehem before leaving, which would make them full. We see that land redeemed shortly.